You've just spent 40 minutes comparing 11 different pillows that all claim to fix your neck, your posture, and possibly your marriage. There are pillows shaped like clouds, pillows filled with cooling crystals, a pillow that syncs to an app. Somewhere in a warehouse, a memory foam mattress is being vacuum sealed into a box small enough to mail, which is either genius engineering or deeply suspicious. But rewind far enough, past the showrooms, past the springs, past the tag that legally forbids you from removing it, and you find a version of humanity with none of this. No mattress, no pillow, no app. Just a body, a patch of ground, and a very long night ahead. The easy answer is that ancient people simply lay down wherever they got tired. The real answer is more interesting and a little more dangerous. Before anyone invented comfort, they had to invent survival. Because the actual problem was never where to rest. It was how to lose consciousness for 8 hours without becoming someone else's breakfast. Go back far enough, and the safest bed in the world was 30 feet off the ground. Chimpanzees still do this every night, weaving branches into a springy platform, folding leaves on top, checking it, adjusting it, then climbing in like a tiny primate contractor inspecting their own work. It's not random, it's deliberate. And it makes sense, because up in the canopy, most things that want to eat you can't easily follow. But something happened to our particular branch of the family tree. We got heavier. We got better at walking and worse at climbing. A 200-pound hominin trying to nap in a tree isn't clever. It's a cautionary tale waiting for gravity to finish the sentence. So the ground became the only option, and the ground came with a price. It was open. It was shared with lions. Sleeping down there wasn't a downgrade in comfort so much as an upgrade in risk, and solving that risk took more than instinct. It took fire, cooperation, and the very human trick of turning a dangerous space into a controlled one. Fire changed the math entirely. It wasn't just warmth, it was a floodlight against the dark, and a fairly effective way of telling predators, this spot is taken. Around it, people didn't just sleep, they lived a second daily life after the sun went down, fixing tools, quieting children, arguing about whose turn it was to listen for footsteps. Even without walls, a good campsite was architecture. An overhang blocked rain. A raised patch of dirt kept you from becoming part of the mud by morning. And numbers helped too. More bodies meant more ears. And here's the part that sounds almost too convenient to be true. Humans naturally split into night owls and early risers. In a group of any size, that means someone is probably awake at almost every hour. Not because anyone assigned a watch schedule, but because biology already had. Nobody needed a rule book. They just needed enough people with different internal clocks, and the night mostly covered itself. Comfort arrived the same way most human inventions do, by someone getting fed up. The bare ground pulls heat out of your body all night, collects damp, and always seems to hide exactly one rock precisely under the spine. At some point, somebody dragged over an armful of dry grass just to stop shivering, and noticed it worked. Leaves added cushioning. Reeds let air move underneath. Hides blocked the worst of the wind. None of this required understanding physics. It only required paying attention. And humans had a long head start. Because every bird, every rodent, every great ape sleeping in a nest had already been running this experiment for millions of years. We just moved the idea from the branches to the floor. But grass, it turns out, has an expiration date. Slept on night after night, it fills up with sweat, crumbs, shed skin, and every insect species with an eye for real estate. So old bedding got swept out, or better yet, burned, which cleared the mess and left behind ash, a surface bugs are considerably less enthusiastic about than a damp pile of used grass. None of this is guesswork. In the Lubombo Mountains, on the border of South Africa and Eswatini, there's a place called Border Cave, and buried in its floor are traces of grass bedding roughly 200,000 years old. Not scattered randomly, but concentrated at the back of the shelter, laid over ash in what looks unmistakably like a chosen sleeping area. That ash wasn't just leftover fire debris either. It seems to have been placed there on purpose, because fine ash clogs up the breathing systems of ticks and makes it harder for crawling insects to move at all. Mixed into the same layers, researchers found fragments of camphor wood, a plant known for aromatic compounds that insects tend to avoid. Nobody can prove with certainty why those branches ended up there, but the pattern is suggestive, to put it mildly. And scattered through it all, burned grass, meaning old bedding was periodically destroyed and replaced. This wasn't tidiness for its own sake, it was maintenance. And maintenance implies a mind that expected to come back and sleep there again. Further evidence comes from Cebudu, another South African shelter, where roughly 77,000 years ago, people built bedding from sedges and broad-leaved grasses, some layers topped with leaves from a tree called Cryptocarya woodii, which happens to kill and repel insects on contact. By around 58,000 years ago, that bedding was being burned on a routine basis, and the floor shows it. Layer after compacted layer of plant material, ash, and daily life stacked on top of itself like pages in a book nobody meant to write. What's missing from the record is anything organic that didn't survive. Hides, frames, blankets, all gone, leaving gaps we can't responsibly fill. But what did survive is enough to retire the image of early humans simply collapsing onto bare rock. 200,000 years ago, people were already selecting sleeping zones, layering vegetation, managing pests, and refreshing the whole system with fire. They weren't sleeping without beds, they were sleeping without furniture catalogs. Here's where the evidence runs out and the guessing begins. Because archaeology can tell you people put grass on a cave floor, it cannot tell you if someone lay there at 2 in the morning, staring at the coals, quietly regretting something they said during the hunt. One popular theory says ancient humans slept in 2 separate blocks, waking for a stretch in the middle of the night to talk, pray, or just exist in the dark before drifting off again, an idea borrowed from historical records written long after the fact. It might be true. It might only be true for the specific people who wrote it down. Sleep bends around latitude, season, temperature, workload, and danger, and a winter camp in Ice Age Europe was almost certainly running on a different rhythm than a group near the equator. Even the idea of natural night watches, useful as it sounds, is a pattern researchers have proposed by studying living hunter-gatherer groups today, not a fossilized schedule dug out of the dirt. The honest position is less tidy than a headline. There was no single ancestral bedtime. There was only the nightly problem of staying unconscious without becoming a casualty of it. Once ground sleeping became survivable, it stopped being just biology and turned into something closer to society. A camp at night wasn't a scattering of tired bodies. It was a working system of warmth, protection, and shared attention. And people gravitated toward the fire partly because it was useful, and partly because everyone else already had. That's usually how meaning gets built, a practical fix that quietly turns into a tradition. Sleeping close together cut heat loss and meant a frightened child never had to go looking for comfort in the dark. It was already an arm's length away. That closeness came with obligations, too. Someone kept the fire fed. Someone decided whether the noise past the firelight was wind, an animal, or just a relative returning from an ill-timed trip into the bushes. And because movement got harder after dark, the group slowed down and talked. And those conversations weren't idle. A story about someone who ignored fresh tracks near the river was easier to remember than a rule, and far more likely to save the next person's life. As camps became settlements, the sleeping space kept evolving. Floors resurfaced, hearths positioned with intention, raised platforms lifting bodies off damp ground and out of reach of crawling pests. Bedding got woven, stuffed, traded, passed down, eventually decorated well past anything the human spine actually required. But the real invention underneath all of it wasn't the platform or the padding. It was trust. Sleeping beside someone means handing over your awareness completely, and betting they won't hurt you, abandon you, or let something dangerous wander into camp while you're unconscious. Every shared sleeping space was a quiet agreement renewed each night, long before anyone built a wall, a road, or a city. And that logic never left us. We still build nests, just with better materials. We still arrange the environment before we surrender to it, choosing a side of the bed, a temperature, a sound, a locked door, a phone glowing faintly nearby like a tiny emergency beacon for a threat that almost certainly doesn't exist. Even insomnia is an inheritance. The brain doesn't switch off like a device. It keeps monitoring temperature, sound, hunger, and threat long after the lights go out, which is occasionally useful and occasionally the reason you're replaying a conversation from 6 years ago at 10 past 3 in the morning. Comfort was never handed to us. It was assembled, one small discovery at a time. A softer plant here, a drier corner there, a leaf the insects avoided. Passed down until the ground itself became something humans had quietly engineered. So no, ancient people didn't sleep without beds. Not really. They slept without bed frames, without mattress brands, without a 12-month payment plan. They still built the space. They still maintained it. They still protected each other while lying inside it, completely defenseless, trusting the dark to hold still until morning. And tonight, when you sink into memory foam and complain the mattress runs slightly too firm, remember it started as a pile of grass, just with considerably better marketing.